Hi, everybody. Welcome. So, my name is Dominique Marley, and I am the creator of the New Earth Alchemy system. And I founded the New Earth Alchemy Academy. And we have just finished the first training. So, I'm here with Dr. Pete Jeffs, who is one of my most brilliant students, and he has a lot of hats. So I'm just going to tell you a few of them. So he's got a doctorate in evolutionary biology, had to write it down. He's a Reiki master, a systemic kinesiologist, horse whisperer, and also you work with tone and sound, and probably a whole bunch of other things. But it was just going to get too long-winded, right?
That's good.
So thank you so much for having this conversation. And I'd just love to hear about your experience of the training.
Wow. Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to share about this. And first of all, just to say what an amazing training it's been. It's been a real journey. Um, and um, how to say, I mean, there are so many things to say about this work. Um, the first, I think, is just how beautifully structured it is. And in something that can be very expansive, one of the things that's been really clear, I mean, when you hear the term New Earth Alchemy, I mean, you can go straight to the heavens. What we're doing, I would say, is so grounded, and it comes through in the way that you've structured it, chapter by chapter, has just been amazing, because that has given us all in your first cohort of students, it's given us the chance to really, take things one at a time and to really work in depth with each stage. So it's been a fantastic experience. And I would just say for anyone listening, I mean, just how much I recommend this. I think if you are working with whatever healing modality, um, I think something that is very interesting about this training is that, and I know you said to us at the beginning, at the outset, Dominique, the aim is not for you to become like me, but for you to develop, to take the work and then build it into your practice. Now, when I first heard that, I was not really quite sure how that was going to work. But over the weeks that we've been working together, it's become very clear because I've seen how, for example, in my case with the systematic kinesiology, I mean, I can see ways of working, I can see parallels, I can see overlaps. And so it's obvious that I am going to, coming from my background, I am going to use that as my way in. I know that another member of our amazing group, who is more into massage therapy, she has worked in a kind of massage way. So, it's so interesting. And I think one of the great, the generosities of this training is the fact that you offer us the invitation to adapt, to develop, and then, of course, with the feedback, I mean, this enriches the work for everyone because we discover how, the different applications. So, I mean, that's really the first thing that I would say is just how beautifully structured it is, and how that also, I mean, as anyone who's done any healing work and any training will know, that we work on ourselves or we work on our colleagues. If it's a workshop situation, we may work on each other. If we're doing this kind of work online, we will work probably primarily on ourselves. And so there is a huge amount of personal healing, of self-healing that comes through taking this work, taking this course. Um, and that opens a whole chapter because not only are we learning to work with a new set of tools, but we are also using those tools in our own lives. And so we have shifts and we have changes and evolutions and things, and those are, of course, specific to each person.
Yeah. Did you find it interesting when we started investigating what was in our own personal matrix and those discoveries? Because for me, I'm always really intrigued when I find out, oh wow, this money block comes from my ancestors, or it's karma, or it's from the parallels. I mean, it was quite fascinating, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think this reflects another level of the, the rigor and the thoroughness of what we're doing. Um, I think there's I mean, having done quite a number of online trainings in different forms of energy work, one of the things that I come back to a lot is this question of real world results. The number of trainings that I have done, and I can tell you with some very well known and very highly respected people, but honestly, you go into the training, you come out of the training, if something happens, great. If nothing happens, great. It doesn't really matter because once they have, that sense, sort of taken your check, that's it. That's where the interest drops off. And this is something that I've actually had a real problem with in terms of that sort of deep engagement in real world results. And so going into this material and doing this, and with the fact that, each time we use one of the techniques or one of the approaches, we are very directly asking for real world results, there is this question of going down and finding out where things lie, what level, where do we find it? And that's where you've got to be a real sort of Sherlock Holmes. It's detective work. So, it is amazing, and it's obviously going to be different from one person, one student, and from another. But, that invitation to go in and then start, excavating the layers. I mean, it's between Sherlock Holmes on the one hand, kind of an archaeologist, going down the levels and trying to work out what is the root of a whole series of things.
Yeah, it's such an adventure, and the group's been so engaged. And then on the Facebook group, everybody's been kind of very openly sharing their results because everybody's so excited at the discovery. And each time they share something, we're learning something new. So we're a little bit like a think tank, or I imagine we're a little bit like sort of Einstein and his sort of senior students trying to split the atom or something. It feels like that exciting to me.
Yeah.
So you've worked with some clients you very quickly integrated some of the consciousness technology techniques with clients and had some interesting experiences.
Hmm. So, again, I mean, the first experience is always working with oneself.
Yeah.
And what I find, obviously, and I mean, as you said, I work with quite a number of different techniques. And when I'm working, I will ask what techniques are appropriate. And that is something that's, again, I mean, one is lucky to have different range of techniques. But asking which is appropriate is very, very important. And so rather than trying to push something that one has learned, oh, well, I will just go and use this because now, da da da. I mean, actually, there is a kind of invitation as one is working to think, oh, this actually may be appropriate. And the lovely thing is one can then test into that. And so either whether one's using a muscle response test or whether one's using the pendulum, but one can ask, is this technique appropriate at this time for this client? And so there's a very natural invitation to using the work that I find. And I think particularly as I'm, you know, in that process of sort of appropriating new techniques, learning to think in a different way, those invitations are really important. And so, yes, there have been clear indications where I should use one or other technique with different people. And I'm also seeing in my range of the, in the clients in my practice, also I'm sort of getting intuitions about which techniques might be helpful to which people. And then the question is effectively, how do we bring that into the therapy session? And so that is another, another part of the art. Because some people are much more open to this kind of work. Some people are much more sort of, shall we say, dimensionally open, and other people are much more closed. So there is, there's a real art. And I mean, I think that's part of the art of, in the end, the art of the therapist is knowing also how to bring someone in when a technique will be appropriate for them to help them and to bring them into that sort of healing space.
Pete, I wonder if you might share the story about your experience with the horse, because that was really, really beautiful.
Well, this was very interesting because I've been working with one of my client horses for over a year now, and um, so I say that we've just been working with her body armor, and that armor is really quite considerable.
Is this
And
because the horse was abused?
no, this is, I mean, it's many, many levels. She's had a very peaceful life, and so this is not someone who's come from a particular trauma. In fact, it goes much further back, as we discovered. But what was interesting was that after one of the many clearings that we had been doing together in our group, and I had done a lot of past karmic clearing for myself, and I was amazed at some of the things that I was experiencing. And I had mentioned this to um, the horse's owner. And what was so interesting was, I mean, I was standing quite close to her horse, and we were talking, and I was just mentioning this sort of past life work and these different elements of the karmic clearing that we were doing with the New Earth Alchemy. And this lovely horse just sort of turned towards me, and in a way that was just so inhabitual, it was almost like she could have popped her nose, into my open hands, and she just stood there. And I said to her owner at the time, I said, I'm sure she's listening to us. And I have an idea that maybe she's saying, when is my turn? And that was the most beautiful opening then. I spoke later with her owner and she said, look, go for this, do it.
Pete, what was the horse
And so,
before? What state was she in, and why were you working on her?
I mean, initially, I mean, she is, I mean, I should say she's a very interior horse, and she's been known to bite people. She has shall we say, moody, has great potential. So, she really keeps people at distance. And that's something that's really, contributed to her relationship with her owner. And that's the kind of area that we've been working in. And, gradually she has been relaxing. Um, and the work has been going very nicely. It's very slow, it's very gentle. Um, in this case, there was a very clear indication, to work in this way. So I worked with her at distance. That's one of the great things that we can do with these techniques. So, doing that level of past healing, working on root causes, looking at victim and perpetrator trauma, a whole series of things, and then looking at the multidimensional matrix, basically going through all of those at distance. And what was so astonishing was that the next time following this, that I worked with this horse in person, um, there'd been certain techniques that I've been using that were always relevant. I mean, particularly things like tuning forks and so on. And her whole energetic profile had changed between the time that we talked about doing this work, the New Earth Alchemy, and the next time I saw her, there were things that had really shifted. There was a softening in the eye. There was just much, much more gentleness. And as I say, certain techniques like the tuning forks, I mean, which had been relevant every session right the way through, were just simply not showing up as being relevant at all. So clearly something very, very profound had happened. And I mean, we're in the process of working with this, so, little by little. Um, but it just showed me, A, that how powerful this work is in terms of the kind of shifts I mean, this application was carried out at distance. Um, that's one thing, and I think the other thing is, um, again, this question of the invitation. So, these are not techniques that I would necessarily use with everyone or with any horse. It's very much, there, for me at least, there is a clear invitation to go in that direction. And that's when I go. So I mean, I find it absolutely seamless with the other techniques. Really becoming This is becoming another part of my toolkit.
Mm,
And I'm now looking at ways in which I can, assimilate all the different techniques, because there are many, and into my own sort of practical kit, so that I can, work easier either at distance from home or in the field, and
mm,
literally in the field.
in the field of consciousness, exactly. Yeah. What did you prefer? Did you, because we do a series of very deep clearings, multidimensional clearings, and then we do this holographic work where we're expanding new potentials, like with the crystalline matrix or the pop process, which is about pathways of possibilities. And so, what did you prefer, the clearing or the sort of expansive technologies?
Um, I, to be quite honest, I I like each of them for what they are,
Mm,
and that's not because I don't want to choose. Um, what I have actually been doing, I've kind of created a diagram, part of my own toolkit,
mhm,
of a person, and looking, for example, at the past life issues and the karmic drags and things like that on one side, and then the potential and the future potential, like, for example, the pathway of possibilities on the other side. So, and then techniques which relate to grounding, which I have listed underneath the feet. And then over the head, I mean techniques which enable us to move, for example, dimensional techniques, opening to consciousness, uh, you know, f- building on our connection with source, for example, if there's interference or something like that. So the way I've been looking at it is really in that sort of, oh yes, and in the center we have, things, techniques which really relate to the body. So, when there's something that's somatically manifesting, and so it's a question then of something, in the sort of physical, physical plane. So I have those kind of five domains, and the way I've been looking at it is, as I say, I mean, this is, from a sort of therapist point of view, is to help me when I'm working with the client, think, okay, we're kind of coming in from this direction, so which of these techniques would be the most appropriate? And I mean, so it's a question of, it's like a kind of, how to choose, how to find. I mean, of course, you could just test down a list, but actually, I quite like this idea of, say, looking at things that are influences coming from the past, influences that are opening potential into the future, blockages with people's grounding, blockages to source, and that kind of divine connection, and then sort of somatic issues in the body. And so we have, within the teaching of this first course, I mean, we have many techniques to work in, and some of the techniques come up several times, but I've really been exploring that. So there isn't any one technique. That said, the pathways of possibility is very, very interesting indeed. And I mean, having done a long cycle of, I think, 22, 23 of these on myself a couple of weeks ago, I've now started on another series. I think, at Pop, where am I? Pop 11. I think I've just completed Pop 12 out of 16.
I'll just
And
explain. Shall I just explain what it is? So
please, yeah, of course.
yeah, it came out of a moment when I was really, my back was against the wall and I just needed to find a way through. And I just asked my team, so this is something that we work a lot with our alchemy teams and our spirit teams who kind of guide us. I just said, show me the way through. And this diagram came through that activated a sort of holographic field with different pathways out of the state of consciousness that I was in. So I did this diagram, and then I realized that you can do complex diagrams. So, for example, I had quite a lot of anxiety throughout my life, and I thought I'm going to work on the anxiety, but it needed 18 diagrams. I had to work with fear and victim consciousness and ancestral inheritance and so on. So then you have to make a whole bunch of different diagrams that kind of pop the consciousness and create new pathways of possibilities. And you guys have been working with this and getting incredible insights with each of these diagrams, which are these holographic fields of consciousness that open us into the field of miracles. They expand us into where we haven't, where our consciousness hasn't been, our consciousness has been contained in a kind of a limitation. And these diagrams open us out beyond those limitations. So that's been quite fun. And also something, feedback around what you're saying is that this is what I've witnessed with so many of you guys, is that you've taken the technologies and also this way of looking at reality, and it's created new maps, new ways of interpreting reality, new ways of understanding your own inner workings and how consciousness works. And because we all have a different interface with consciousness, we take these technologies, and just like you said, you've adapted it completely differently. And you did that once before when we did the ancestral work. We do a lot of grids where we really sort of go into a lot of detail about what are the energies held within my ancestral story and so on. And you expanded on it in a really beautiful way. Then you put that on the Facebook thing, and that inspired everybody and gave us new ways of going even deeper with our work. So it's been really a collaborative adventure between myself and you guys.
But I think that's also very true with the horses, because I mean, with certain of the grids, they very much apply to humans, and in one sense. And so when you're working with animals, then there are other things that come up. And so again, one of the beautiful things about this, set of techniques, and the way in which you teach us and the way in which you encourage us, is to to innovate, to rather than say, well, it's got to be done like this, A, B, C, D, no way. So what is this? So what about the horse? Where's the okay, so the grid for my horse in this case is going to be completely different. It's going to be a horsey grid. So I'm then sort of working with my horsey grids and thinking, what are the kind of things that they are? So we have got, certain kind of human things, I mean, it might be, you could have like a money trauma or something to do with gambling. So, gambling isn't necessarily something that is going to be relevant to a horse. But a horse could be involved in somebody's war, somebody's crusade. So, suddenly, there are these different aspects. And one of the things that I just love about this work is that, each of us within our field, if you're more kind of massage oriented, or you're working with horses, or you do some other kind of, therapy,
Land
that
work.
you just get those intuitions, and and then you see how to adapt it. And I think it's very rare, for example, I mean, just speaking with respect to yourself as a teacher. Often the teachers want people to do it the way they teach it. And I've been in situations where, oh no, you shouldn't be doing it like this, you should be doing it like that. So you kind of, and then you can get into a whole, dynamic, which isn't actually incredibly helpful. Whereas you are really, just opening the door. And of course, then because we share, so we're seeing how different people are working with their clients, and somebody has, something's come up, so they've done it this way, and then, maybe I'm working with a horse or something, and so I'm coming thinking about it in another way. So it's really beautiful, and the Facebook group has been really powerful, inspiring. Everyone has, is a really lovely energy to it, and so much sharing. And so, and often when I'm reading through the things, like, oh yeah, maybe I should test that because I didn't do that, or I could do that, and I go deeper into this. So that sort of, it reminds us to develop things in a, in our own way, but gives us, little inspirations. And so everybody's kind of teaching everybody, which is
And
lovely.
me too. I'm very much sort of feeding off the energy of the group, because actually about 30% of the material that I taught on this course, I had not downloaded it beforehand. And it was suddenly just being in the energy of the group. And I just suddenly wake up one morning and feel, oh, we have to do this thing now. And they'd be things that would be very, very exciting pieces, like when we cleared all those core traumas. And I just launched into it, kind of not realizing how deep it was going to be. And but it was very powerful and very
Mm,
cleansing for our systems. So my
definitely.
material has expanded exponentially through the insights of the group. In fact, you guys have asked me to do an anti-aging, a rejuvenation and beauty program, which I had done in previous years, but that's been requested, and now level 2 and an ongoing sort of monthly mentorship. So there's going to be a lot of support in the future, so that we can keep on expanding this alchemy, because it's not like I'm teaching you a dead technique. It's like it's a living thing, and everyone is free to have their own map of reality. They don't have to sort of adapt to mine, and everyone is really creating brilliant work just based on their own relationship to life. And that
Mm,
is what is incredibly beautiful. So from this little nugget, all sorts of new work is kind of being born that isn't a repetition of the new Earth Alchemy. It's like what you said, your new map, your work with the animals. We have somebody working with land, somebody working with body. You also work with body. Um, so it's, yeah, it's really, really exciting space for consciousness exploration that we've co-created together.
yes, yes. Um, I think one thing which, again, I mean, I think is a real, leap in, I mean, well, a leap in understanding, a deepening of my own understanding. Again, this comes a little bit through, there are a lot of people doing energy work out there, and there are a lot of people promising a lot of things. And as I say, having done, I mean, taken quite a number of courses with quite a number of teachers and gone through those, what I'm really understanding, and I think this is, through the New Earth Alchemy and through your approach, that I have learned personally, is just how deep some of these blockages go. And because of the structure of a lot of other courses, for example, you join, you pay, you do your thing, you have 5 lessons or whatever, and then that's it. Basically, it's over, it's finished. And so there isn't that follow through. And also, I mean, if there are changes and transformation, great. And if there aren't, then those programs are gone. They're already, setting up their next sort of level. Whereas here, we are really going in depth, and I can honestly say I have never been to such depth in issues
Mm,
I mean, for example, looking at certain levels of trauma. So we look at it from the point of view of the victim and the perpetrator. So
mhm.
that in itself, so I mean, we end up with these grids, I mean, massive grids, and it's quite sort of, astonishing. But I mean, where I'm beginning to feel certain shifts is because we're really going down into the basement and doing this at very, very deep level. And I think in some ways, I mean, I'm not entirely sure quite why, but I mean, it seems to be at this time, particularly, that so much clearing and so much healing is being done by so many people, but we are really going through a lot. And I'm sometimes wondering if maybe this is one of the fundamental transformations that is taking place at this time because, I mean, I don't know, the beginning of psychoanalysis, I mean, I don't have the dates in my head, but I mean, the list of Freud's publications is not so old. We haven't actually been doing this work for that long,
Well,
and then, with Jung and his writings right the way through, uh, in the sort of 40s and 50s and 60s. And, again, I mean, another deepening. And now so many amazing people are just taking it further and further. And I kind of feel that part of this is a very deep and profound and very moving sort of encounter into just actually how much trauma so many of us are carrying. And when we see the kind of chaos, I mean, I find it incredibly moving. I find it incredibly moving from the point of view of the horses because I know that we have embarked them on so many of our completely insane adventures within the history of humanity. And that's something that I feel particularly called to work with. There is so much madness, there is so much trauma, there is so much that is holding us back. And so to really acknowledge this and understand that it isn't just like click of the fingers and it's all sorted. No, you've got to go down into these levels. And this, so I mean, the journey that we've been on since, we began, we're what, week 14, week 15. I mean, we have been doing this work for some months, and it feels to me like we have just started. Such is the depth. And I mean, again, I just can't thank you enough for, sharing this with us and really honoring the fact that there are no easy answers, and that where the difference is going to come is through our dedication, our rigor, our patience, our just keeping at it, because we are doing this for ourselves, but we are doing it for our children, we're doing it for our ancestors, we're doing it for their ancestors, we're doing it for all the animals, we're doing it for all the living beings on earth. We're doing a huge amount of work at the moment. It is just astonishing. And I can see for myself from the point of view of, my therapeutic work. I mean, the New Earth Alchemy is right in there now as a kind of core, one of my core techniques to work with this, because I see just how incredibly relevant it is. And all kudos to you for bringing, channeling this through and then for sharing it so beautifully with us over these weeks. Absolutely fantastic.
thanks so much. Thank you, Pete. Well, I mean, there's so much we could go on about this for a long time, but maybe that will do for today. I love working with you. You've been a real inspiration in the group. I call Pete the professor because he is a fountain of knowledge. And yeah, we just like to invite more healers or people who have an affinity with a resonance with energy work and who want to learn more about how to use these technologies, but always in a way that is authentic and true for you, to just, well, go to the website, dominiquemali.com, and jump on the next course. Pete, thank you. And I'll be seeing you
Most welcome.
tonight. No, Monday night.
Monday. Absolutely. Thank you,
Lots of
Dominique.
love, honey. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Bye.